Imagine for a second that you are sitting in a cold, concrete holding cell.
Yeah.
The air is stale. The ticking of a clock somewhere down the hall feels like incredibly loud. You have committed a serious crime. You have been caught dead to rights, and you are staring down the barrel of a decade in a miserable, unforgiving prison.
Sounds pretty bleak.
Right. The walls are literally closing in on you. The panic is rising in your chest, and you realize you have one last desperate play. You decide to fake insanity.
The classic move.
Exactly. You figure, how hard could it be to act a little crazy? You talk to the walls, you swat at a few imaginary spiders, you babble incoherently, and boom, you get transferred to a comfortable psychiatric hospital instead of a cell block.
If only it were that easy.
Right. But how hard is it really to pull that off? There is an old Japanese proverb mentioned in the source material we're exploring today, and it simply says, thieving begins with lying.
Oh, that's good.
It points to the slippery slope, a dark psychological space where deception takes root, and eventually it just kind of takes over.
And that proverb perfectly sets the stage for what we are looking at. Today's deep dive focuses on a fascinating classic medical text examining what early psychiatrists called simulated insanity, which is what we commonly refer to today as malingering.
Right.
We are going to explore the psychological tightrope of faking madness, the ingenious and honestly sometimes brutal ways early diagnosticians tried to catch these malingerers, and the terrifying reality that pretending to be insane can actually alter your biology.
Which is just wild to think about.
It really is. It could drive you right to the edge of the abyss.
It's just such a pervasive cultural myth that faking insanity is an easy get-out-of-jail-free card. I mean, we've all seen the movie trope.
Oh, absolutely.
The criminal acts erratic, the doctors rub their chins and look fooled, and the bad guy gets away with it. But diving into this text completely shattered that illusion for me.
Yeah, the early medical professionals actually initially thought they could spot a faker from a mile away.
Right, like it would be obvious.
Exactly. But modern psychiatry reveals it is one of the most grueling, near impossible feats a human mind can attempt. The sheer physiological toll of a sustained deception is just staggering.
Staggering is the right word for it.
The text points out that a truly successful simulation is exceptionally rare because it demands an extraordinary, ceaseless amount of energy. The author uses the term psychic toughness.
Psychic toughness.
Yeah. We are not talking about telling a single lie to a police officer. We are talking about maintaining a highly complex, erratic deception for weeks or even months.
Without a single break in character.
Right. 24 hours a day. And the most compelling part is that this level of deception cannot remain purely mental. It eventually bleeds into the body's vasomotor processes.
Okay, vasomotor processes. That implies the autonomic nervous system, right? Like the things happening in your body that you literally cannot consciously dictate.
That is the crucial distinction, yeah. Vasomotor functions control your blood pressure, your heart rate, whether your pupils dilate, whether you break into a cold sweat.
You can't just fake a cold sweat.
Exactly. You cannot just command your blood pressure to drop because it fits your performance. The text notes that maintaining the psychic toughness to fake madness eventually overrides these autonomic systems.
Wow.
And the author is very specific about who actually possesses the bizarre disposition to even attempt this, pointing specifically to thieves and poisoners.
Poisoners. That is so specific.
I know, right? There's this fascinating observation from a researcher named Krauss, included in the text. He noted that common criminals, so someone who commits a crime of passion, for instance, they lie clumsily.
Like it's obvious they're lying.
Yeah, their lies are palpable and easily broken. But thieves lie skillfully. Krauss says they lie unthinkingly, that it has become so much second nature to them that they actually believe their own lies.
But why thieves specifically, though? I mean, I guess a crime of passion is impulsive, but thieving requires premeditation.
That's a huge part of it.
It requires constructing a completely false reality for the victim. I suppose if your daily survival depends entirely on deception, the cognitive dissonance of constantly lying would start to erode the boundary between truth and fiction in your own brain.
Spot on. A thief lives their life anticipating scrutiny. They're constantly managing a dual reality, what they know to be true and what they need the world to see.
Right.
A researcher named Delbruck described this phenomenon as developing a double consciousness.
A double consciousness.
Yeah, think of it like a computer trying to run two entirely different operating systems at the exact same time. The hardware simply is not built for it.
No, it would crash.
Exactly. Eventually, one system is going to crash, or they are going to corrupt each other. The liar gets hypnotized by their own game, and those two mutually exclusive realities begin to fuse together.
That immediately makes me think of, like, method acting, but taken to an incredibly dark pathological extreme.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Because you hear stories of actors who stay in character off camera for months, and they talk about losing touch with their actual identity.
Yeah, it takes a serious toll.
But the saving grace for a stage actor is that they know the camera will eventually stop rolling. They know they can go home and take the makeup off.
Right.
These pathological swindlers, as the text describes them, they do not have a director to yell cut. They're trapped in the performance.
Which introduces a massive physiological problem. If running those two operating systems, that double consciousness, requires such a relentless expenditure of conscious energy, how does some criminals sustain it for months while under constant medical observation?
Because nobody has that kind of stamina.
Right, no human possesses that kind of limitless willpower.
Yeah.
The conscious mind needs to rest. And this leads the text directly into the realm of the subconscious, specifically focusing on the concept of hysteria.
Yeah, the text suggests that many of the people who attempt to malinger already possess an underlying hysterical disposition. So they have this incredibly fertile ground in their minds for something called autosuggestion.
And autosuggestion is a incredibly powerful mechanism. If the conscious mind is exhausted from maintaining the lie, a mind with a hysterical disposition will essentially transfer the burden of the performance to the subconscious.
So they stop actively faking it.
Exactly. To use an analogy, it is like driving a car on a grueling road trip. You're exhausted, your hands are gripping the wheel, your foot is cramping on the pedal. Autosuggestion is the equivalent of the car suddenly switching into a highly advanced cruise control.
The car just drives itself.
The subconscious takes the wheel. And the terrifying part is that once the subconscious is driving, the driver realizes they can no longer touch the brakes. The symptoms become completely automatic, operating entirely at the expense of conscious control.
And the examples the text provides of what this hysterical autosuggestion looks like in practice are just, they are pure nightmare fuel.
Truly brutal.
We are talking about gruesome, violent extremes that defy basic self-preservation.
Yeah, the physical manifestations are shocking. The author details a case of a woman who wanted to avoid work and secure a free long-term stay in a hospital.
Okay.
Through this hysterical disposition, she developed such an intense localized numbness that she was able to intentionally burn her own feet with sulfuric acid
Oh my God.
in the most atrocious manner without reacting to the agony.
That is just hard to hear.
It gets worse. There is another case documented where a woman systematically killed off her entire dovecot, all of her pet doves, just to harvest their blood so she could simulate coughing up blood from her lungs.
Wow. It requires a level of detachment from reality that is hard to even fathom.
Definitely.
And the researcher picked documented cases where this splitting of reality was entirely mental, without the physical self-harm.
All right, the fantasy cases.
Yeah, there was a young girl who spent her days fantasizing about being an empress. She painted this royal life in such glowing, obsessive colors that it caused a total fracture in her consciousness.
The complete break.
Yeah, she entered what the doctors called a twilight state, where the fantasy permanently overwrote her reality. And there was another girl who daydreamed about perilous situations to the point where she staged an elaborate fake assault on herself, literally tying herself to a table.
Which is just so incredibly elaborate. The clinical observations of these patients forced the psychiatrists of the era to completely reevaluate their diagnostic criteria. They realized they were no longer reckoning with the possibilities of normal psychology.
Okay, wait, hold on. I have to interject here because this brings up a massive philosophical contradiction.
Okay, let's hear it.
If someone's subconscious has taken over so completely that they can pour sulfuric acid on their own feet and genuinely feel no pain, are they even faking anymore?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right, because if your brain has physically altered your nerve reception to make the lie your reality, haven't you just actually crossed the line into madness? At what point does simulation just become a legitimate psychiatric condition?
That paradox is the exact muddy water the early diagnosticians were drowning in. The text argues that in these severe hysterical cases, the label of simulation becomes almost irrelevant.
Because it's real to them now.
Exactly. The conscious lie, the initial decision to fake an illness, acts as a catalyst. It's a spark that ignites a pre-existing powder keg of mental instability. Once the explosion happens and the subconscious autosuggestion takes over, The patient is genuinely experiencing the delusion or the physical numbness.
So the acting stops.
Yes.
Yes.
They are no longer faking symptoms. They are a victim of a mind that has fractured under the weight of its own deception.
Wow. So if that is the long-term chronic effect of lying over weeks and months, I am really curious about the opposite end of the spectrum.
The acute cases.
Yeah, the text shifts gears to look at what happens in the span of like 5 seconds. What happens to the human brain the exact moment the handcuffs click? We are moving from premeditated, elaborate deception to the very real, immediate mental breakdown caused purely by acute bear.
The sudden shock of arrest or impending punishment triggers a completely different mechanism. The text cites the work of Pierre Janet, a pioneering psychologist who studied the effects of trauma.
Right, Jenna.
Janet proposed that violent, sudden emotion has a literal decomposing action on the mind.
Decomposing action. That's a strong phrase.
It is. It is not just a feeling of being scared. The terror actually disorganizes your mental synthesis. It severs the connections between your thoughts, paralyzes your willpower, destroys your ability to focus, and reduces you to automatic, almost robotic movements.
Okay, yeah.
The researcher Bass documented this in himself. During a massive earthquake in Japan, he noticed a total emotional and physical paralysis. His visual perception was perfectly fine. He could see the building shaking, but his ability to feel emotion or execute complex movements was completely gone.
The fear just shut him down.
The fear had literally decomposed his mental faculties.
It's the ultimate system failure. I mean, think about examination fright or stage fright.
Oh, sure.
You prepare for a massive job interview. You know the material backward and forward. You walk into the room, they ask you your name, and nothing. The blue screen of death.
You just go blank.
Your brain just halts. But the text is exploring this natural human phenomenon dialed up to a catastrophic clinical level in the context of the criminal justice system.
Exactly. And the text highlights a fascinating case study to illustrate how this decomposing terror can mimic simulated insanity.
The mentally defective man, right?
Yes, a mentally defective man was accused of rape, which is obviously a highly severe charge. When he was brought into the asylum for observation, his behavior immediately appeared suspicious. He stuttered uncontrollably, he gaped blankly at the doctors, and as he walked around the room, he constantly made these sharp, rigid, bizarre military turns.
Which makes him look like a textbook bad actor.
Right. To an untrained eye, it looked like a clumsy criminal putting on a terrible performance of profound stupidity.
Right.
Except after 5 days in the asylum, his mind suddenly cleared. The stutter vanished, the robotic turns stopped. He wasn't faking it all.
Wow.
The sheer terror of his arrest, combined with the utterly alien environment of the psychiatric ward, had completely overwhelmed his baseline cognitive abilities. His mind had decomposed under the stress, and it took 5 days for his mental synthesis to stitch itself back together.
His brain essentially went into safe mode just to survive the shock.
That's a perfect way to put it.
And the second case study involving acute terror is brilliant because it introduces a way to objectively test for it.
Oh, Rickland's experiment, yeah.
Yeah, it involves a 17-year-old boy, also accused of a serious crime, who was exhibiting extreme embarrassment and an absolute inability to answer the most basic questions.
Right.
The doctors wanted to know if he was playing dumb or if he was genuinely paralyzed by fear. So Dr. Rickland used word association tests, but he introduced an ingenious twist, a ticking metronome.
Rickland's experiment is a masterclass in cognitive testing. He had the subjects listen to a ticking metronome and ask them to draw pencil strokes on a piece of paper in time with the ticks, all while trying to answer the word association prompts.
So he's making them multitask.
Exactly. He was deliberately forcing a division of attention. He was artificially increasing the patient's cognitive load.
But why does a metronome prove whether someone is faking or not?
Because of how deception functions in the brain. A liar is already running 2 mental tracks, the lie they are telling and the truth they are hiding.
Right.
If you introduce a third track, the metronome, you would expect a faker to stumble on their lie. They might accidentally blurt out the truth because their attention is divided, but that is not what happened with the 17-year-old boy.
What happened?
The added cognitive load of the metronome completely destroyed his ability to process basic concepts. His word associations deteriorated into completely meaningless, gibberish or mechanical, echoing repetitions.
So it proved that the freezing wasn't a performance.
Exactly.
If he were just faking, the metronome would have ruined his act.
Sure.
But because he was genuinely paralyzed by terror, the metronome overloaded his base-level processor. It is like trying to solve an advanced calculus problem in your head while a fire alarm is blaring inches from your ear. You literally do not have the bandwidth to form a coherent thought.
Absolutely impossible.
So we have explored premeditated deception, we have looked at the terrifying power of subconscious autosuggestion, and we have seen the decomposing effects of acute terror. The text then brings all of these threads together into one incredible, ultimate case study that completely baffled the psychiatric expert.
Oh, the masterpiece of deception.
Yes.
This brings us to the case of Jay. Jay was a wandering mill hand with a long history of grifting. He managed to embezzle the life savings of his wives, yes, multiple wives, and went on the run.
As you do.
Right. When the authorities finally caught up with him and placed him in solitary confinement, he immediately began to exhibit highly erratic behavior. He gave confused, nonsensical answers to the guards, claimed there was a murderer hiding under his bed, and insisted he saw imaginary spiders crawling on the walls.
So the prison doctor takes one look at him and suspects he is catatonic.
Right. And catatonia, in this psychiatric context, refers to a severe psychomotor disturbance. A catatonic patient might exhibit profound, rigid immobility, completely unresponsive to their environment, or conversely, purposeless and excessive motor activity.
Okay.
The prison doctor assumes Jay's brain has broken from reality, so he is transferred to the asylum for rigorous observation.
And Jay's behavior under observation is this fascinating, contradictory puzzle.
Yeah, it really is.
The doctors ask him to lock a door, and he deliberately tries to jam the key into the keyhole upside down.
Which is just too obvious.
Right. And they hand him a matchbox, and instead of sliding it open, he forcefully breaks it open from the side.
Right, acting like he doesn't understand basic objects.
Exactly. Yet he seamlessly extracts a match, successfully strikes it, lights a candle, and puts the match out correctly. It is this bizarre cocktail of feigning gross incompetence while accidentally revealing perfectly intact fine motor coordination.
The doctors, heavily suspecting a simulation, decide to test his endurance. This is where the physical extremes we discussed earlier with vasomotor processes come back into play.
Oh, this part is intense.
It is. In one instance, Jay stood completely rigid by his door for an hour and a half. He did not move a single muscle until his body began to fail.
An hour and a half.
Yeah. He broke into a profound cold sweat. The color drained from his face, and he genuinely fainted, collapsing unconscious onto the floor.
Because he locked his knees or just stood too rigid for too long.
Exactly. On another occasion, he aggressively, repeatedly banged his head against a heavy door head first. And when the doctors administered deep needle pricks to test his sensory response, he exhibited a total lack of pain sensation. He barely flinched.
I am just in sheer awe of the biological paradox happening inside this man's body.
It's hard to wrap your head around.
Jay is making a conscious, calculated choice to fake badness. He is actively thinking, I'm going to stand by this door like a statue so the doctors think I'm crazy. Yet his body reacts with genuine, involuntary extremes. He didn't fake the fainting spell. His blood pressure legitimately plummeted from the strain.
Yeah, you can't fake passing out like that.
And he didn't fake the pain immunity. His brain actually blocked the sensation of the deep needle pricks. He pushed his conscious lie so deep into his psyche that his biology fundamentally altered itself to accommodate the performance.
It's terrifying.
But then, after all of that unimaginable effort, he breaks.
He does. On day 6 of his intensive observation, Jay suddenly snaps out of his catatonic state. He urgently demands a private interview with the medical staff.
And his confession is remarkably mundane. It's almost pathetic.
Totally anticlimactic.
He admits that he faked the entire episode because he was scared for his family's reputation following his arrest. He was terrified, he didn't know what to say to the interrogators, and he thought answering questions would only make his situation worse.
But the real reason he gave up,
Yes. Tell them.
he confessed because he simply got sick of always lying in bed.
It is the most anticlimactic ending possible. After violently banging his head against a door and enduring deep needle pricks, he just got bored and tired of the bed rest.
I know, it's wild. But the doctors, knowing the complex layers of deception we've been talking about, they didn't just take his confession at face value.
Right, they had to be sure.
They followed up with objective cognitive testing. They administered Kreplin's arithmetic tests, which involve continuous basic addition over a set period.
Okay, so just doing math problems.
Exactly. Kreplin's test is designed to measure cognitive fatigue and attention span over time. Even though Jay had confessed and was ostensibly acting normal again, he performed terribly on the arithmetic.
Really?
Yeah, his error rate was abnormally high, and his processing speed plummeted as the test went on.
Which proves what, exactly?
It proves that his mental battery was fundamentally drained. His energy and attention were rapidly tiring because his brain was exhausted from the 6-day performance. The conscious effort required to sustain that double consciousness had severely depleted his actual cognitive reserves.
So how did the medical board ultimately judge this masterpiece of a performance?
They ruled that Jay was only partially responsible for his simulation.
Wow. Partially responsible.
Yeah, the performance was so unyielding and the physical toll on his vasomotor system so real that before his confession, the experts were on the verge of diagnosing him with either dementia praecox or Ganser's syndrome.
Let's define those for a second, because those are heavy clinical diagnoses. Dementia praecox is an older psychiatric term, right?
Yes, dementia praecox was the historical term for what we now generally classify as schizophrenia. It literally translates to a premature out-of-mindness or premature deterioration of the brain. The doctors thought his mind was genuinely fracturing.
And what about Ganser's syndrome?
Ganser's syndrome is uniquely relevant here. It is often characterized by a patient giving approximate or completely senseless answers to very simple questions. The text describes Ganser's syndrome as a simulation that has simply slipped out of the conscious mind and deeply into the subconscious.
So they start off faking it, but then...
The person starts by faking the absurd answers, but the act gets transposed into their underlying psychology until they can no longer control it.
So the doctors are essentially saying that his fake insanity was so good, it proved he was mentally unstable.
If we connect this to the bigger picture and look at the overarching thesis of the source text, the conclusion is profound.
Yeah.
The author argues that the very act of successfully simulating insanity is, ironically, clinical proof of a highly abnormal, degenerate mental disposition.
Because a healthy person couldn't do it.
Exactly. A truly healthy, well-adjusted mind simply cannot sustain that level of intense, unyielding deception without breaking character or without the hardware of the brain crashing entirely. The line between faking madness and actually descending into it is razor thin and perhaps non-existent.
Catching the malingerer, then, isn't just a matter of playing detective, looking for a slip-up and yelling, "Gotcha."
Far from it.
It is about untangling a deeply complex, chaotic web. The diagnostician has to separate the premeditated conscious grift from the creeping reality of subconscious autosuggestion.
Right.
They have to account for profound psychological vulnerability, the paralyzing effects of acute terror, and the physical limitations of the human nervous system. It's not binary. It's not like looking at a broken bone on an X-ray.
It remains the ultimate diagnostic muddy water. The observer is tasked with finding the exact microscopic point where a conscious, desperate lie morphs into an undeniable physiological reality.
Which leaves us with a pretty chilling final thought to mull over.
Always the best part.
Obviously, most of you listening will never find yourselves in a concrete holding cell trying to fake a psychiatric breakdown to avoid prison.
Let's hope not.
Let's hope not. But think about the everyday masks we wear in our own lives.
Oh, absolutely.
The plastered-on customer service smile you wear for 8 hours a day at work. The brave, unwavering face you put on for your family during a grinding personal crisis. Or the highly curated, impossibly perfect persona you present on social media.
We all do it to some extent.
We do. And the source material shows us that the human brain is incredibly malleable and the subconscious is always listening. If you pretend to be something for long enough, putting all of your psychic energy into a role day after day, month after month, at what point do you stop acting?
That's the scary part.
Do you eventually become the mask? Next time you find yourself stuck in a role you've created, remember the immense toll it takes on the machinery of your mind and ask yourself who is really in control.